Good morning, everybody. I wanted to, on this happy Labor Day morning, just take a quick look at DEX trading. I found myself becoming more and more interested in trading on DEXs over the years. If you followed my analysis on Twitter or other spaces, I had said that this year is probably 2018, the year of the DEX, and most of that that call, if you will, was due to just seeing the coins very bullish, and I'm referring to coins like BTS, just as an example. But what I have actually found for myself is that over time, I found trading on DEX to be a bit more enjoyable, if you will, and certainly more secure and out of the eyes of bots and larger traders, etc. So thought I'd discuss that a little bit. Just to introduce myself real quick, I'm Ryan Wilday. If you haven't followed my work, I'm the lead cryptocurrency analyst at Elliott Wave Trader. That's a site devoted to the Elliott Wave theory, with trading rooms devoted to everything from the S&P 500 stocks to there's a large contingent of gold mining analysis and gold going on the website, as well as Forex. And then I cover the cryptocurrency service and trading room. You can follow me on Twitter and Steam it there. And then if you're interested in a free trial, there's the link. We do 15 days, no credit card, if you're interested. Just quick disclaimers. I'm not going to read through these, but mainly as I talk about DEXs, if you will, I don't know if that's how you say it. I don't want to suggest that I'm endorsing any of these as a product. You will be really clear in my experience of them as I speak. Some of them I don't have a close intimacy with, and some of them I actively trade on. But I don't want to endorse any of them because your experiences may be different. But let's go forward and let's see what we can make of this. Here's a list of the DEXs that I'm aware of, and probably about 50% of these I've had active experience on. I'll talk about that a little bit more, and then so I'll just list them real quick. So of course, most people know about BitShares, one of the early creations of Dan Larimer and his early work, which is actually still to this day a pretty advanced product that I certainly can't complain about. And then I list CryptoBridge and OpenLedger because they are basically clones of the BitShares blockchain. Techies may attack some of my language and specificity, but they are related to that blockchain. And then Ethereum exchanges, I think, still of note, and I think honestly over time they've gotten better. We've got Paradex, for instance, which is a Coinbase product. Paradex.io. I'm going to get the .io just to make sure you guys know where to find it. And then EtherDelta, which is a .com, and then Radar Relay, which is .com as well. Those are all Ether exchanges, and as far as I know, the Radar Relay is based on the OX protocol, which is itself an Ether smart contract. EtherDelta, I think, is an early smart contract based system I've traded on and have not in some time. It's improved. And then Neo, I traded the Switch.io exchange. I don't know if there's any more Neo-based DEXs, and that's for trading Neo and its tokens, its smart contract tokens. And I'm finding it pretty interesting lately. And then Komodo, BarterDEX, which is really interesting. I had very limited experience, but that one is interesting because it has atomic swaps between chains. So it's not a exchange that's based on or limited to the ecosystem of a certain coin. And then, of course, emerging is the EOS set of exchanges. I'm aware of two, DEX EOS and NewDEX. I'll show both of those. I haven't made trades yet, but I've been exploring them. And then RAM trading is not really a DEX per se, but it's like decentralized trading, and I'll elaborate on that. So without further ado, well, let's first talk pros and cons. I think that one of the top pros is security. You don't have any counterparty risk necessarily with trading on a DEX. That's because you hold the private keys. And I would define a DEX, it was on the previous slide, as a place where you hold custody of your own funds, and the exchange itself does not hold those funds. That's the way I would define a decentralized exchange. I'm sure other techies would come up with something else or something more elaborate. but that's my definition. And so as long as you keep those private keys safe, you're generally secure. We have had exceptions of DNS hacks, and EtherDelta was one of those, where private keys, if inputted into EtherDelta, some funds were lost. So that was an unfortunate event. It's corrected as far as I know so far. It was a while ago, but it's something to be aware of in the future. And then I think, what I've found more and more is that there's ease of use. I think a lot of you are aware of the security protocols on exchanges these days to avoid user compromise. Everything from IP, a new IP, you've got to get a new confirmation on your email. That's what Bittrex does. You have, a lot of CAPTCHA, if I've expressed that right, to make sure you're not a robot, getting in, and a lot of other security protocols for good reason. But a lot of that's unnecessary if you're holding the private keys. As long as your private keys are kept secure and uncompromised, you don't need any of that. So quick logins through an app or a browser to trade very quickly and then depart is one of my, in that ease of use in and out of the trading environment, is becoming kind of a preference for me. We've got some cons. One of this liquidity, and there's some coins on some DEXs which are quite fine. I'm finding liquidity on the EOS exchanges to be pretty tight. BitShares, if you're trading BTS, the BitShares coin is pretty good. And then, but there's still liquidity, limited liquidity in some exchanges. And then poor charts. This really depends on what sort of user you are. But I'm very much a power chart user. The way I use TradingView, it can range from my own indicators built to algos that I've built. And I'm not super, I'm still more of a hands-on trader, but I've created a lot of custom things in TradingView, including log fibs, which I have to hand calculate if I don't have my tool that's built into TradingView. And while TradingView charts are being deployed on these exchanges, when you use the third party or the TradingView library, you don't get all of that coding capability. So for me, as a power user, I'm quite disappointed in the charts on these sites. So, but they may be okay for you. And actually, probably most traders are fine. And then record keeping taxes is a real nightmare. I am going to be one that says don't use a DEX to hide your taxes from the IRS if you're American. But you still need to keep records to do that. That's the challenge, right? So that's the one of the worst things about cryptocurrency trading, in my point of view, especially that I've got that as a profession now. So something to think about before you trade on DEXs. So IRS wants every transaction noted. All right, so let's go through some of these. So the first one, as I stated, is BitShares, and I've blacked out spots on this just to keep my balances hidden as best I can, because I don't want to. There's not a lot in this exchange, or any of these exchanges, but yeah, I just want to hide my balances. But let's go through this. I mean, this exchange is quite liquid. So if we look at the exchange tab, you need to create your own login, and you'll get private keys, and you'll need to store the private keys somewhere for the next login. And then, I should say also those private keys can work in a BitShares wallet. So they don't just work in the exchange. This is a private key for the blockchain and your account on the blockchain. So you don't need the exchange to log into. So if this ever went down, you can still get your BitShares out of there. However, it's pretty awesome in terms of security. Now, when you look at the BitShares website, or the exchange, it seems to me that the most liquid coin here is BitShares, and you can see the order book here. So we've got a 0.1 BT. Let's go to dollars. Sorry. So BitShares in dollars. So I'm choosing BTS here, and then we're going to go down and look for one of the US dollar tokens. Now the US dollar tokens generally, here's a Tether, Open Ledger Tether. There is BitUSD right here, which is a US dollar stable coin based on the BitShares blockchain, which is a marvel technology if you ask me. And if you look at the book, you've got a price of 8.56 BitShares and 8.56 and 8.58 in the spread. for this US dollar. So it's actually pretty tight if you consider that BitShares is, I believe it's under 10 cents or around 10 cents right now. I don't know offhand. That's a pretty small amount in between the spread. Let's look at Bitcoin real quick. BitBTC is one token version. Let's see how tight this is. It might start to spread a little bit. So it's quite wide. So 55, 500, and 61, 122. So what that means to me is that we can go over every single spread, but to me this is a great place to be in and out of BTS and Open Ledger or BitUSD or one of the other stable coins, as long as the spread is pretty tight. I also, on Elliott Wave Trader, I do some other charts like EOS and against BTS, and the spread's a little wide. However, I saw that EOS was likely trending ahead of BTS, so a certain amount of my holdings here on the site currently are in Open EOS, which is Open Ledger's version of EOS. It's real EOS, but it's allocated on the Open Ledger. So it's something to consider out. So if you look at portfolio dashboard and portfolio, although I've covered up, I actually have some OpenSteam and Open EOS right now in my portfolio, and I have these other things, a little bit of BitUSD, not much, and a bunch of these other things that are airdropped or something, which I have no idea what to do with, and then BTS, which is about half my holdings at this point in time. So again, blacked out for a reason. Now the other interesting thing about the DEX, the BitShares DEX, is that you can actually margin certain assets. So they have BitBTC, I believe would be renminbi, Chinese renminbi, euro, ruble, silver and gold based assets, and you can leverage some of them by going over to adjust and using these arrows to leverage up. I don't recommend doing that most of the time because it's a highly volatile asset, talking about BTS, but you can use some of your BTS to leverage. I believe it's up to 2.25 of your BTS to leverage on some of these assets. So for instance, you can actually, if you want to get more BTS on leverage, you can leverage up, leverage your BTS to get BitUSD, and then in return buy BTS, and you basically by proxy have a margin long position in BTS. Now I don't know how there's a way to short BTS doing this. I can't for the life of me figure out how that works because it's a little bit different system. Do recommend videos on margin trading with BTS if you're curious. Something I would recommend doing very little of, except for those times when you have a really nice trade setup that can really go. So with a nice tight stop. So because otherwise you can really lose. You cut your account down really fast. So that's the BitShares overview of it. Again, pretty liquid in certain assets, not liquid in all. The margin capability is interesting, and this one's been around and been stable, and I've never heard of any issues with it. So so check it out. Next, and I don't have much experience with CryptoBridge, Open Ledger, but what I just showed you on BitShares, it should be very similar in those. CryptoBridge, there's a Bridge coin, or I may be renaming it, which is actually a token based. You can get BitShares there, but there's also a CryptoBridge token that provides some liquidity on that exchange. So, okay, so Ethereum exchanges, and let's talk about Paradex.io. And one of the issues with Paradex.io is it's a Coinbase company actually, and so they're really concerned about regulation, and so they'll note your IP address and where it's coming from, and if you're in the U.S., they'll lock you out. And so I'm actually VPN'd right now, currently in another country, but you would enter in and you would connect via a wallet, and so I like that it has MetaMask and Ledger. I have a MetaMask. MetaMask is this, if you're not familiar with, is this let's see, get it up, is this Chrome extension, and so if you have an account, you can send Ethereum there and use that on this exchange. And so this is basically a portal into the Ethereum network. You can also connect your Ledger, which most of my Ether tokens and Ether are on a Ledger and not sitting somewhere else. So that's awesome and secure. So without going too much into this, and one thing, when you're working on, I believe this is a factor of the OX protocol, you're not actually trading real ether, but you're trading this wrapped ether. And I'm not clear exactly personally where to get wrapped ether. It may be that you want to actually grab some over at, let's see if it's over at Ether Delta, for instance. Let's see. I don't see it listed here. So I'll have to check back and figure out where to get wrapped ether myself, but you would want to buy that with your ether. And it's basically a tokenized version, ERC tokenized version of of ether, and it has a symbol WETH. But you know, when you have that, then you have some really great trades and everything from BAT to ZRX itself and OMG. So a lot of great coins that at least I do analysis on and look forward to what they'll do in the future based on my charts on this site. And so I haven't used this yet, but it looks pretty simple. Log in with your ledger, and then you get a normal market. And let's check out some spreads. Let's do let's see. I'm trying to think of liquid. Not great. 289 to 286 for the DAI, which I don't even know. Let's get another market. OMG Ether should be a little tighter if you ask me, but let's see. 0.01 to 0.017. So we're getting a little bit tighter, but there's not much liquidity. So that would be the problem with this exchange. Now it's pretty new, so we'll have to see how it develops. Just checking out a couple other ones and see if they change. Yeah, not a lot of liquidity on this exchange yet, unfortunately. But I think it's an interesting interface, and I think it's something to watch for. The next one is Radar Relay. This one you would also, so you would open, let's see, open app. So this one also you can log in with your ledger, select a wallet, and so again, MetaMask, or let's get that again, MetaMask or your ledger. And this one seems to have a little bit better liquidity than Paradex. This one does not lock out US users from what I can tell. And again, they're probably less concerned about regulatory. I mean, Coinbase is doing a lot of institutional work now and wants to stay on the good side of the regulatory agency. So this one looks pretty good in terms of liquidity, at least in ZRX wrapped ETH. Again, on this one, you also need to get wrapped Ether to trade Ether against tokens. Otherwise, you can trade a lot of tokens against each other if you go through these. So something to look at if you're trading Ether tokens. Pretty interesting. Again, you can always trade these on other exchanges like you know, Bittrex, Binance, etc. But you don't get the benefit of trading your Ether tokens through with your own wallet and having those tokens remain with you and in custody, especially when you're using the ledger. I mean, that's a huge secure way of trading. And then finally, Ether Delta, which has been around for a while. In the past, it had a DNS hack. I assume through that they made it far more secure. They added also Ledger Nano Access on this too. And when I look at this, it sure looks a lot better. Liquidity is still a little loose, if you ask me. Let's check in a couple other tokens. Let's see. See, does it change? Okay, I'm gonna have to look at this interface another time and see how to change tokens. Oh, here we go. Sorry, it's up here. So let's just try OX, because OX has been kind of moving really well. So I assume that it will get some liquidity. Let's see, do they have it under ZRX? ZRX. Change. It's not changing for me. All right, well, we'll have to revisit that. Interesting. Something to look at. And then one thing I want to say about the Paradexes is you have to install and deposit your coins into the smart contract that is on there. So when you look at account, if I hit new account, it's going to create one for me. And when you insert your ledger, generally, I haven't done the new method, but I assume that you still need to install or deposit your coins into smart contract, and you can see it kind of grayed out here, where you would deposit your Ether and your uh, and your in this situation PPT or Populus. So so once you deposit from your MetaMask or Ledger into here, then you can freely trade, and then you withdraw it right back out of the smart contract and back into your wallets. And that's going to be similar on a lot of decentralized exchanges. So there are videos on that for you on YouTube. If you're interested in Ether Delta, go to their YouTube videos. Same thing with Paradex and Radar Relay. So something to check out. And then finally, well, before we get to EOS, we got the NEO, and I'm going to pull this open. And so the only one I'm aware of is Switcheo, and that's Switcheo, SWITCHEO.exchange. And this is an exchange based on NEO. And it's pretty interesting. There's there's been airdrops and smart contracts and new tokens released on the NEO network. A lot of this work's being done in Asia. And I think some of them are interesting to watch. I've been buying, Switcheo has a token itself, SWTH, and I've been buying it in small amounts because the chart is somewhat interesting. The charts all, from an LAWA perspective, are a little bit messy for my subscribers. However, we get some things like diagonals. So we have a little bit of a push here and then a corrective move. I'm hoping this will loop back up. If it's much below this zone here, then I'll stop out. But but these are what's really nice about these is they're really volatile. So what I'm doing here is increasing my NEO basis because there's no USD trading here. And if this does loop around and gets up into this, if we look at this symmetrically, we may see this at 0.005, which is about a 20% return in NEO basis. So given that long term I'm bullish on NEO, I can increase, if I'm good at trading some of these tokens, I can increase my NEO basis over time. Now let's look at logging in. So I'm over here on my left screen copying my private key, and so you hit this login, and they have a private key, and so I'm going to paste this in. And you'll see my balances come up. I've obviously obscured these for good reason. But if you look at, I have wallet balance, which is the my NEO balance on the NEO blockchain, and then there's a contract balance. And just like what I described in Ether, you have a contract balance on Switcheo. And so you'd want to deposit you press this deposit button and to get it over to the contract to make it tradable, and then you would withdraw to reverse it back. And so that's the process by which you would enter into the trading. Now, one thing I would say about this exchange real quick is the spreads are a little bit wide, not terrible, but one thing I've also realized too is that putting in a stink bid, limit order is good. It's always a good thing to do, but it's particularly good on this exchange because of the spreads, but also because the fees are free if you're using limit orders. So every order I've put in here, I've put in a limit order, and just I think everyone has gotten. I've had to cancel a couple and restate some, but most of them have been triggered. So it's the liquidity is not amazing, but it's also not terrible. You can see some liquidity issues in the chart with some of the kind of gaps in continuous candles, etc. But it's not as bad as you think. Now they also have an interesting contest for trading Switcheo, and if you put in a certain volume, they'll reward you in Switcheo tokens, which is kind of interesting if you're a big volume player. And then lastly, let's talk about the EOS DEXs and then RAM trading. So there's two DEX EOSs that are worth looking at. There are probably more starting to come out, but DEX EOS, that's DEXEOS.io, and the other one is NewDex, newdex.io. And both of these are really similar. I think it's interesting, if I'm not mistaken, you might be able to actually arbitrage these two. They both, you log into both using Scatter. So if you're not familiar with Scatter, it's a Chrome plugin, much like MetaMask. You can actually use it for Ether as well as EOS. I have my private keys in Scatter, and so if I unlock this, and then I can log into the exchange through sign in, and then it'll show my balances. So we have a balance here. I don't have any Tribe in my EOS account, but if I did, it would start to come up. So you would have that, and then you would trade. And actually, the liquidity, I'm actually on some coins been pretty impressed with. On some days, it sort of depends, but here's Black EOS, which has been really moving, and 23% today, and in EOS basis. And we have a spread of 0.08 to 0.096. A little bit loose today, but I've seen it much tighter. So it's something worth watching. We got some movers today. DAB at 500. DAB at 500. Poor 40%. So we got some pretty serious movers. I bet DAB is just hitting the exchange today, which which is interesting. Anyway, so that's EOS, and definitely something to look out for. And I particularly, am gunning to increase my EOS holdings over time through trading on these tokens, especially with all these airdrops. And if you are, receiving these airdrops, it's nice to see that they have a value. And one thing nice feature on DEX EOS is when you log into Scatter, and I don't have mine logged in, but if you go to Tools, see if it'll move, it'll show your balances, not just of your EOS, but your total EOS basis with all of your airdrops, tokens, everything tallied up. So that's nice to see. And I saw personally a 15% increase in the value of my EOS account through just airdrops recently. So pretty cool to see those things have a tradable value at this point in time. And I think some of the projects certainly are interesting. So something to look at. And then last is we're going to talk about RAM trading. A lot of people are not very familiar with RAM, but it's been going a little nuts. Well, it's been going down lately, but it was fully expected, and so now we may be near a turn. And there's a lot of ways of doing this. If you're familiar with the GrayMask wallet, which you can get on GitHub, and you put your private keys into that, you can trade directly in the wallet. RAM itself is the data portion of the EOS network, and so if you have a project or whatnot and you need to put data, you need to purchase RAM to enter data into the blockchain. That's my non-tech explanation of it. It's a component of the network and not a separate token. It really is part of EOS. And so you can see how volatile the chart is for all the way from 0.9 down to 0.1. So even within just a little bit more than a month, we saw a 90% drop. However, this looks like a completed pattern to me, or almost complete. And then in the 0.1 to 0.07 zone, I'll be buying. Now, to do this, you would also log in through Scatter. If I press this login and my Scatter was unlocked, I would log in. And then you would just hit RAM. Now, this has a limit order function. However, it only lasts for an hour. And so if you're watching, if you want to get the order, definitely you're going to have to babysit that order. But and then if you're familiar with EOS Flare, you can I'm not going to tap mine because I don't want exposing all my assets, but if you go to EOS Flare and look at your account, you can see that your RAM was bumped up once you make that purchase. You can also see it on here on the interface here when you're logged in Scatter. And that's how you trade RAM. So, and it's not a DEX per se because you're not trading other coins, but you are trading in a decentralized way, if you will. So I hope that all makes sense. If any questions, as I post this on YouTube and Steam and etc., please comment, and I'll happy to answer the question as best I can. And maybe there'll be some updates to this as this whole space develops. Thanks a lot.